Welcome back to JoeSchaferFlyFishing.com. I'm Joe Schafer. The last fly in my series of Schafer's flies is what I call Schafer's Gummy Crane. This is my newest creation. It'll be out soon in Holly Flies. But this is my newest creation. Been developing it for about the last year and a half. And it's been a really excellent fly just about any time of the year. I originally found this picture. A guide buddy of mine, Chris Steinbeck, seined up a bunch of these cranes and grubs and things like that. And we took pictures of them. And I couldn't figure out how to mimic them. And I finally came to me one day while I was actually sitting on the toilet. So this is where this pattern got developed from, off of pictures from a seine, and came up with this pattern, and it's been plugging away on fish ever since. It's a good heavily weighted pattern, so you can fish it just about anywhere. Fished it in big rivers, small rivers, and even some still waters, and had great success with it. So first material we use in this fly is a .020 lead wire, or you can use the lead free wire. And we're going to wrap that onto the hook here. So we're going to grab a piece of that, and you can see I have mine on a bobbin because I tie so many of these darn things. But it just makes it a little bit easier to wrap if you put it through a bobbin. So I'll wrap that together, kind of push it down together. Here, make sure all those wraps are tight and good. Push it together. And I want it going just a little bit back from the bend and just a little bit back from where the hook eye is, so you can kind of see those distances there. Alright, and then all I have to do is pull that off, and we got the start of our fly. That lead wire is really key for this fly because it weights it down on its own. A lot of times you don't even have to use weight with a fly like this. So it's a good nymph pattern to have, or running it behind a streamer or anything like that. So I'll make some wraps here. And what I want to do is make sure I keep that lead in place. So I'm going to build up a little taper to the back of the lead here. Then I'm going to come forward. A lot of wrapping of thread on this fly. And we're going to put a little wedge at the back of that so it stays in place. And we're going to come all the way back to just at the bend of the hook here. And we're going to come forward, and we're going to put a little taper in at each end of that. One thing about this fly is you want to make sure that you cover up that lead pretty good. Otherwise it can tear into the other materials that we're going to use in this fly. Cut off that tag end. And then we're just going to build over the top of that wire. Got a little piece sticking up there. Just if you have a little piece of that wire sticking up, just take the end of your hook scissors and just you can kind of mold it down, and it'll just form right for you there. We're going to come back to the front here, lay another little taper in here, making sure we don't build too much behind that eye because we're going to tie off a lot of things there at that eye, so we don't want too much of a taper there or too much build behind that eye. Again, we don't have to be real careful with this. Let those thread wraps lay down. You can use a bigger thread here. I'm using a 70 darker, I call it worm tan, in this thread to come over this fly. It just kind of matches the natural color of this fly. And 70 builds fairly quickly, but I don't have to completely cover those wraps. I just want enough to where there's nothing sticking up and nothing's going to hinder that material that I put over the top of it. So that's how we start with that. Next material we're going to tie in is ultra wire, size brassy, and brown. I used smaller wire on this before, and I had a lot of problems with it snapping. on the flies as I was fishing them. So I went to this heavier wire and it didn't affect it really at all, but it holds a lot better. So the brassy size is the size that you want to go with on this. So I'll tie that in, making sure that it's good and tight in there and nothing's gonna come out on me there. All right. Next material up is 1/4 tan scudback, and this material I'm sure you're very familiar with, but this is going to be our top layer. These crane flies and things like that, especially in the waterways that I've seen, they're two-tone in color, so this kind of mimic the top portion or half the portion. I like to cut off that thin skin at an angle. It makes it a little bit easier to tie in. So I'm just going to bind that down, make a bunch of turns, making sure that it's laying flat and flush. So when I pull that over, that there's no kinking or anything like that in there. I'm going to go over that a few times. Just making sure I got a smooth surface there. Make sure that that stuff doesn't come back out. Try and make this fly as durable as possible. It's not always easy with the materials that we're using here. They're not durable materials, but you can help that by making sure you tie everything in good. So our next material is Squirmy Worm. Okay, of course this is being used like crazy everywhere for different worm patterns and stuff like that, but I found that it builds a great little body for this crane fly. And what I'm going to do is stick it against the hook shank there, and I'm just going to catch the smallest piece of it I can and then pull, and that way I can bind it down to the hook here. Just take care to cover that all up and then return that little bit of thread to the back, making sure I cover up all that squirmy worm, get it tied in there real tight and good. Right there. And you'll see that there's a little bit of a build going on back here. I want that build because these cranes and things like that in the natural, if you see the pictures, their segments are irregular, and the way they move their bodies is kind of slides, and there's different segments showing of them. So you got bigger portions, you got smaller portions. So with this fly, no two are going to look the same, and you don't want them to look the same because in their movements in the water, and we were watching them move around, they're real sluggish and they kind of move around a lot, but their body segments are all different shapes and sizes. They kind of flatten out, some of them. Other portions build up real fat. So no issue with any extra build or anything like that. We want those things in this fly. We don't want any two to look the same as each other. That's what's kind of cool about this fly, is you don't really have to worry about how you're wrapping or anything like that. Just get the general form and you're good to go. So next material that we're going to tie in is a Mirage Opal medium tinsel. The reason I use medium is it's a lot fatter and I can tie it a lot quicker, especially when I'm tying a lot of things. And this flash will show through this material when it gets wet. And that's what I want. It's got a little pearlescence to it, and it'll shine right through those other materials. And it's a little secret hot spot to this fly, kind of hidden away in there. And we want that little pearlescence showing through. So it really adds to the fly, and it really, when I originally tied these, I didn't have that in there. And then when I started putting it in there, it just changed the whole game of this fly. So you want to make sure and include this in this fly. It's very important to the integrity of the fly. So we'll return that thread forward. Got a good base layer, nice and even here. And now I'm going to wrap that flash forward. And as I'm wrapping, don't worry about if it's just a little bit off or there's a little gap there. No biggie. It's like I said, each one of these is going to be different. Don't worry how that goes. Once we get to the front, I'm going to bind it down a couple times, then I'm going to fold it back over itself and bind it down a couple more times, putting a little bit of thread there over those layers so I have some place to finish everything off and it doesn't slip. You can see there it'll slip a little bit, especially with this bigger flash material. So you just want a little layer there that you can go over with everything else. And I cut that excess off. Now as I come forward, I'm going to go with this Squirmy Worm material. This Squirmy Worm material is a little bit tough to work with, but once you get used to it, it's no big deal. And what I want to do is loose wrap this. I don't typically at the back here, I may do one loose wrap and then a little bit tighter wrap, but I don't want to go too tight. I want those segments built. I want those segments to look different. And what helps is if you just pull with your finger a little bit back on that material and do a tight wrap if you're starting to get a gap, and then go back to your loose wraps. And I'll bring that all the way forward here. And I'll just use my opposite hand to kind of hold everything in place. Okay, so you see we come here to the front and we got that excess. I'm going to pull real tight, okay, and I'm going to bind down that front portion there. Okay. And as I'm binding that down, I just want to be pulling back on that material. And I want to do quite a few wraps here because I don't want it to come undone. This stuff will slide around on you a little bit, so you just want to be careful that you get all your wraps in there. Okay. Then I'm going to cut off that excess material, and you see that I kind of got a little head there. That's where I'm going to place everything else. So I'm going to pull back that shell back, kind of connect everything together here, and I'm going to make a turn over the top, make sure it's facing down, and then I'm going to bind that material down, that thin skin or the shell back down with several turns. And you want to make sure, you can even put a half hitch in there, but you want to make sure that you don't lose that material out the front. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do before I cut that off is I'm going to wrap my wire forward. And the first wrap is actually going to be on the shank of the hook there. And then I'm going to come through and go in between those wraps of that Squirmy Worm and make my segments. Now, you don't have to hit every one, and you don't want to hit every one. Okay? You decide where you want to put them. I usually will skip one or two and then hit another one, skip one or two and then hit another one. Bringing that all the way forward there. So that's kind of how it'll look. I have those segments and that. You want to pull a little bit so it gets a little bit snug and make sure those wraps are laid in between. That gives you your segmentation throughout the body. And when it gets wet, you'll see that wire through the whole entire thing, and you'll be able to see that segmentation. It's really pretty cool. So you want to make some more wraps here, tie in that wire, usually 5 to 6 turns will do it. Then I'll helicopter this out. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is pull that thin skin up, and I'm going to cut it off. All right. And then to finish this fly, we're going to whip finish. We're going to whip finish several times here. We'll go about 4 to 6 turns. Stop it. And we're going to go back and do it a couple more times. Reason being is we don't want anything coming out from under those turns. And this fly, it's real easy for this to hit rocks and everything else because it's so heavy, and it will get down in there and pull some of those things out. So if you do a couple extra turns, usually it lasts quite a while. And that's the Shafer's Gummy Crane. You can see it's got a little bit of two-tone in there, just like the naturals. Very effective fly. when you're fishing this, you'll notice that the fish really hang on to this fly. They don't like to let this one go. That's why I call it the gummy crane. It's like gum for the trout. So there's the Shafer's gummy crane. Thanks for watching my series, Shafer's Flies. This is the last installment of it. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care and check out the other things on the website. Bye-bye.